Hello and welcome to Providing Access, ADA Basics for AOE Faculty. I'm Laura Rich, Director of Disability Services with the University. Today's training should give you a good overview of the legal standards that surround the work that we do with students with disabilities. We're going to go over those standards under the Americans with Disabilities Act and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. We will also discuss the accommodations process for students. We'll talk a little bit about the notification process for faculty, how to manage accommodations in your class, what are the rules for confidentiality. I'm also going to go over some frequently asked questions from faculty in adult and online education, and then we'll talk about different support resources that are available. Let's start the conversation with learning a little bit more about why we do what we do in Access. Universities that accept federal funds must meet accessibility standards as defined by Title III of the Americans with Disabilities Act and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. Now, what does that mean for us every day? That means that any otherwise qualified student with a disability can request accommodations to ensure equal access to all programs, events, and activities of the university. Those accommodations are there to provide equal access, not to ensure success, and therefore they do not change any of the essential requirements of a degree program or course. What can change is how students meet those essential requirements, and we'll get into that in more detail later. Because of the legal framework that we work under, there are some key differences between how accommodations are provided in high school and how those are provided in college. And we're going to go over just a few of those. The first big change is that colleges are not allowed to ask if the student has a disability. No one on college staff, either in the admissions process or faculty or staff later after a student matriculates, is allowed to ask a student if they have a disability. Students are allowed and required to disclose their need for services. Campbell University does not test students for disabilities, much like they do in the K-12 system, which is highly appropriate when you're working with children. When you're working with adults, we expect our students to provide any required testing or other documentation to show that they are a person with a disability. Parents also are not automatically a part of the process because our students are adults. All of the records related to disability access fall under FERPA protection and are therefore only released to the student or someone who they've given us permission to speak with. Another major difference is that faculty and staff are not allowed to disclose a student's disability to others. And that's a big change from high school, where teachers often would discuss a student's disability with other teachers. I find that students at this level really appreciate that difference and enjoy having more control of their information. Another major change is that all students who receive credit for a college course must meet the same essential requirements of the course. That's different from high school, where sometimes there were reduced workloads or modifications of assignments in a way that would change those essential requirements. We don't do that at this level because all coursework has to have the same value. Going along with that, deadlines may not be waived in certain courses, and that's a change from high school. The reason for that is discussion-based courses or assignments may require that students participate in a timely manner in order to earn credit, because that's a big part of the learning that goes on with those assignments. Students can also choose when and how to use their accommodations, and that is a big difference from high school. In high school, they were probably in a use it or lose it situation where they were required to use their accommodations on every test or every assignment that came up. In college, they can choose to use their accommodations on certain courses or even only on certain tests. I describe this to students as a toolbox. An accommodation plan is a box of tools that I'm giving them to address the barriers that they may face in their courses. And they can choose which tool they need to address whichever situation is coming up. In K-12, students could have lost accommodations if they were not used, but that's not the case in higher education. Another big difference, though, is that if a student decides not to use their accommodations, there are no retakes if they change their mind. we can always make a change for the next test or assignment, but we can't go back in time and give retroactive accommodations. Now let's talk a little bit about the accommodation process for students so that you as a faculty member will know what your students have gone through to create the accommodation plan that you're given. The first step is that they're required to notify the university by registering with Disability Services. And this goes back to that requirement that we are not allowed to ask a student if they have a disability. The second step is to provide documentation if needed. This is usually something from their healthcare provider, therapist, counselor, whoever is working with them to manage the impact of their disability on their life. Then, for the next step, that documentation is reviewed and conversation is had with the student. And through that conversation and documentation review, an accommodation plan is developed. This is what the legal requirement for an interactive process. This is how that happens. From that interactive process, which is really a conversation about the student's educational history, we talk about what worked for them, what is more challenging for them, what their history is with accommodations, and lots of other things in that conversation. At the end of that conversation, a letter of accommodation is requested by the student, which is then emailed to the student and the student's professors. This step is done each term. So steps 1 through 3 are done one time when the student initially registers for accommodations, and then step 4 is repeated each term when new classes and professors are assigned. While we're talking about the process for students, let's have a little more conversation about some common diagnoses that we see in adult and online education. Probably one of the most common is traumatic brain injury and concussion. This is commonly seen in veteran students, but also in the general population. Students who have experienced TBI or concussion can have impacts on their memory and processing speed. Some also experience things such as frequent or constant headaches, debilitating migraines, and increased frustration and anxiety. Another commonly seen disorder is post-traumatic stress disorder. This again is commonly seen in veteran students, but can also be seen in the general population very often as a result of sexual assault or other trauma. This can impact memory and focus. Anxiety about crowds and classroom environments is also common. You also often see increased frustration and irritability that can impact classroom behavior. Another commonly seen diagnosis would be attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. That's ADHD for short, with or without the hyperactivity. This can be lifelong or it can result from trauma. And while people with ADHD often learn coping strategies as they grow up and symptoms may change with age, this disorder is not limited to childhood as was often once thought. It very often is more apparent in academic settings than in the workplace. Students may struggle with organization, focus on class lectures, or may have difficulty sitting still for long time periods. In the workplace and in other life settings, we're able to make accommodations for ourselves, and so these concerns are not as apparent as they are in the more structured academic setting. Another commonly seen diagnosis is a learning disability. And those, you'll see those called everything from LD, dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, whatever. There's lots of terms that can fall under the category of learning disability. To be diagnosed with a learning disability, a student must display a unique pattern of academic deficits that would not be expected based on their IQ. A learning disability is typically diagnosed in childhood, and they occur often in a specific area, such as reading, writing, or math. Learning a second language can be particularly challenging when you have a language-based learning disability. Another category of diagnosis that is increasing is major mental health impairments. This can include depression, generalized anxiety disorder, bipolar disorder, personality disorders. Lots of different diagnoses fall under this category. These are commonly seen in all populations, but are often comorbid with other diagnoses seen in veteran or aging populations. Students may struggle with focus, organization, class attendance, frustration, and motivation. These diagnoses can be well managed, but students may also experience episodic increases of symptoms that may require additional accommodations. These increases in symptoms can occur without warning or expectation, so these are often the students that you will see requesting accommodations in the middle of a term. So how will you be notified if a student in your course has an accommodation plan? It's a pretty simple process. The first step starts with the student who is going to request a letter of accommodation from Disability Services each term. This letter of accommodation is then emailed to the student and to the student's professors, and then faculty can reply all to the email to confirm receipt. Accommodations are available to the student from that date. Again, we don't provide any retroactive accommodations, so once you receive the letter of accommodation, that is the date at which you should start providing accommodations. Now let's talk a little bit more about your role in managing accommodations in your class. I want you to know first and foremost that there is support available on each campus. Each campus has an ADA coordinator whose name and contact information are at the end of this presentation, who can assist you with things on your site. I'm located on main campus, but I am always happy to assist as well, and if you ever have questions or concerns, please let me know. We're going to go over 3 main categories of accommodations that you may see. The first is testing accommodations, and those can be provided in a testing center or in the classroom. Your campus staff can assist with that as well. The second is classroom accommodations. Those are often coordinated by the instructor with assistance from campus staff. Examples of that would include recording lectures, seating or furniture adjustments, preferential seating or note-taking assistance. And then the last category would be deadline or attendance accommodations, and those will vary based on the essential requirements of each course and are negotiated with assistance from student success and disability services. The deadline and attendance accommodations can get really tricky, and so I'm here to help with those when they are assigned. Now let's look more specifically at each category of accommodation. Testing accommodations are there to make sure that students can clearly communicate back to you what they've learned in your class on their tests. They're there to address any barriers in communication between yourself and the student. The most common testing accommodations include extended time and separate setting. Testing accommodations do require some additional coordination from the student. The student needs to meet with you to explain and work out how the testing accommodations will be provided for each test. Your site may have a testing center, or you may be working with campus staff to arrange different spaces for testing as needed. Probably the most commonly used testing accommodation is extended time. This accommodation is often given as a multiplier, and typically what you'll see on an accommodation letter is 1.5 times or 2 times the standard test time. So if a student has approved for an accommodation of time and a half or 1.5 times, and you allow your class 50 minutes to take the test, this student will be given 75 minutes to take the test. This may require a separate setting, and the start time may need to be different from the rest of the class if the test is being given before a lecture. Students should never be expected to miss class because they're completing a test with extended time. So why do we do extended time? Well, for one, in nearly every course and test that's given on our campuses, speed is not what's being tested. If speed was being tested, then extended time would not be an appropriate accommodation. But that's not typically what we're testing in our liberal arts curriculum. Sometimes students may need a little bit more time to think through their answers and their responses in order to show you what they've learned in your class. Another common testing accommodation is a separate setting. This accommodation can be met in a testing center or by using an empty room near the classroom, as long as it is a good, quiet testing space. Your campus staff can help you with this if needed. A separate setting is often given for students who have difficulty with focus or concentration, or who may have anxiety-related concerns, that the additional anxiety that a test creates for all of us may cause to become problematic in that setting. And so a separate setting can give that student some privacy to feel more comfortable as they're taking their test and focus on the task at hand rather than the impact of their disability. There are lots of other possible testing accommodations, but these are the two that you're most likely to see in your classroom. So let's talk about some common classroom accommodations. If testing accommodations are there to make sure that the students can adequately communicate with you what they're learning in your class, then classroom accommodations are there to make sure that students are able to receive all of the information that you are providing in class, whether that's through a lecture, printed material, activity, or other exercise. Some of the most common classroom accommodations you'll see would be things like permission to record lectures. And most faculty are okay with students recording lectures. They know that that's something that helps lots of students to learn the material. When a student has that accommodation, though, we do not have an option not to allow them to record. Faculty who don't typically allow recording of their lectures can require the student to sign a statement saying they will not publish or otherwise share the material, but a student with this accommodation must be allowed to record lectures. Another common accommodation would be permission to leave class. Students with this accommodation may need to step out of class frequently to address medical needs or to manage anxiety. No penalty can be given if a student has that accommodation. The purpose of this accommodation, ironically, is to keep the student in class as much as possible. And allowing a student to leave class without penalty or question makes them more comfortable to be in that space and participating in class more frequently. Another common classroom accommodation is preferential seating. You may have students in your class who need to sit in a specific area in the class to either participate fully or feel comfortable in the classroom. This is often either the front of class, or it may be in the back of the classroom or near an exit. Faculty who receive a letter that has this accommodation should ask the student if their current seat works for them, and if not, make adjustments to any seating chart that may be being used. Classroom furniture adjustments can also be necessary, and campus staff will work with you to make sure that the appropriate furniture is available in the room. Faculty may need to ensure that the student can use that furniture, so if a specific seating arrangement has been set up for a student in your class, you may need to make sure that no other students are sitting in that particular chair. Note-taking assistance is another commonly seen accommodation in the classroom. Students with this accommodation can be supported in various ways. Another student could provide a copy of their notes. Faculty can provide slides and other lecture materials. There are lots of ways to make this accommodation. To find out what works for your student, have a conversation with them about their concerns around note-taking. Now, why would a student need note-taking assistance? Typically, I see this with students who have difficulty with focus and concentration. This can be as a result of TBI or a head injury, or something such as ADHD or anxiety. Some students and some people learn best by writing while they're listening. That helps us to stay on track and keeps us in tune with what's being said in the classroom. Other students, that can be very difficult for. You're asking the brain to do two different things at the same time. You're asking the brain to listen, digest that information, and write it down. And that can be very difficult for students, particularly when a head injury has been involved or when ADHD or other focus affecting conditions are in play. Asking a student to write and listen at the same time in that situation often means that they are doing neither one well, where if they could just sit and listen, they would actually absorb the material more effectively. Other accommodations could include interpreters or captioning or accessible materials for students with sensory impairments, such as students who are blind or deaf. Disability services and campus staff will coordinate interpreters and assist instructors with captioning if needed, but you may also be asked to alter printed materials used in class and make sure that those are accessible for your student. We'll work with you to support you, but you are the one who designed your course, and so you are the expert in what's going to be used and how that might be problematic for a student. If you do have a student in your class with a sensory impairment, you should receive significant support from your ADA coordinator and from disability services. Attendance and deadline accommodations are often difficult to manage, and so because we know that, we provide additional support for you. These accommodations are given when there is a specific condition that can impact the student's ability to be in class or work on academic assignments in a timely manner. Students who may have these conditions are encouraged to work ahead as much as possible, and in fact, you may see an accommodation that requires early access to assignments, particularly in courses with a heavy online component, because we want to minimize the chance of missing deadlines. Assignments that are time sensitive, such as discussion boards or labs, may not be adjusted if it will be a fundamental alteration to the course. And I'll help you if that becomes a concern. Disability services can provide support with those accommodations because they are a bit more complicated to manage. Now let's talk briefly about confidentiality as it concerns accommodations. As adults, college students are entitled to more privacy than they may have had in the K-12 system, so that may be new for students who have not been in education since they were in high school. Students have to sign a release each term for disability services to be able to discuss their accommodations with their professors. I am not legally allowed to disclose diagnosis, only accommodations. Faculty must not ask students for diagnosis information, and medical and other documentation is not shared beyond disability services. We do that because that protects all of us. Say, for example, you were to know something about a student's diagnosis. They tell you that they have a certain disability, and you then later on make a decision that the student doesn't like. That student could come back and say, well, you knew that I had this disability, and you never liked me after that, and that's why you did this. That would be an accusation of retaliation, and those are very difficult to manage in a legal situation. So not knowing a student's diagnosis protects you as an instructor from any claims in that area. But please, please, please make sure that you never ask a student for diagnosis information. Professors are also not allowed to disclose a student's disability or accommodations to other students. This would include statements such as, oh, I know you take your test outside of the class, or you won't be here next week when we take our test because you'll be taking it earlier at the testing center. Please don't indicate that a student has a disability or uses accommodations to any other students in your class. Now let's look at some frequently asked questions that you may have while you are working with students with accommodations. The first is, what if a student tells me they have a disability, but I don't have a letter of accommodation? The answer to that question is, please refer the student to your campus ADA coordinator and disability services. Students are informed of the accommodation process at some point in their orientation to courses, but they may first disclose to you that they need services. Any university staff or faculty who know about a student's disability must respond with a referral, and this must be done immediately. And the reason for that is, once a student discloses that they have a disability to someone on our campus who is employed by the university, that starts the clock ticking and we have to respond quickly. Next, what if a student sends a letter weeks after the course starts? I want you to be aware that accommodations are never retroactive. In a situation where a student brings you a letter or sends you a letter after the course has started, offer those accommodations going forward, but past assignments and tests do not need to be given again. Please be aware that students may choose to not use accommodations until they absolutely need them, and that's pretty common. None of us tend to ask for help until we have to, and also some accommodations may only be needed when there are episodic concerns that come up throughout the term. Who can I talk with if there's a problem with a student related to accommodations? You have multiple sources of support when it comes to these things. Your campus or program director can be of assistance, the ADA coordinator on your campus, and your dean, as well as disability services or need-to-know people. You can discuss accommodation concerns with any of these supports without concerns about breaking confidentiality. Sharing that a student uses accommodations in your course or venting frustration related to that with other faculty members is a violation of privacy. But seeking out genuine support when you're trying to help the student is not. Faculty also often wonder about this question: who determines what is an essential requirement for my course? The answer to that is you, with input from the rest of your academic chain of command. Essential requirements for successful completion of the course are the outcomes that you want to see to know that a student has learned what is essential in your course. These are often part of the learning outcomes section of the syllabus. Accommodations may change the way that a student meets those essential requirements, but they will still have to be met in order to receive credit. If you have concerns about this, speak with your program or campus director in disability services before making any changes with the student. You are the expert on what's essential to your course, and your input is very important to any decision-making process. What if I believe that an accommodation isn't appropriate for my course? Faculty can appeal an accommodation decision as outlined in the faculty guide, which is available on the Disability Services website. The process includes collaboration with the professor, program or campus director, AOE dean, and disability services. While the appeal is being considered, the accommodations must be provided to the student as written. If you have concerns about an approved accommodation and think maybe it violates the essential requirements of your course, please let us know as soon as possible and we'll help you consider other accommodations or whether the accommodations are appropriate for your course. Disability Services is housed within the Department of Student Success on Campbell's main campus. I serve as the Director of Disability Services, and our administrative assistant is Judy Tunstall. If you ever need to get in contact with me, you can reach me at my email address, and if for some reason you need me urgently, please contact Ms. Tunstall. We will also be adding a position on campus this summer. A learning specialist is going to be hired to work specifically with students with learning disabilities and ADHD to provide an additional level of support. In addition, AOE faculty have access to their campus ADA coordinator. This person has been designated as the on-site contact person for students who have ADA concerns. They can also help you with setting up ways to provide accommodations on your campus. The names and contact information for these folks are listed here on this slide, and I'll update that as frequently as needed. Thank you for participating in our workshop today. Please let me know if you have any questions or concerns. I'm always happy to speak with faculty and help you work out any sticky situations you may find yourself in. Thank you.